Hello and welcome to the Temenos lecture on mistakes in psychotherapy. This is Colin Lago, I'm David Rose. There are some people in the room that you can't see and they might or may not heckle as we go through the lecture, but you can communicate through the website. We're going to the two of us will be going backwards and forwards with this lecture, and so what I wanted to do to start off was just to tell you how we came to be here. Colin and I were talking, as we do, about the wheres and wherefores of counselling and therapy. Doing our grumpy old men impersonation, and I mentioned that when I was training I had the wonderful experience of going to a psychoanalyst for a seminar where he just talked about his mistakes that he had made in his career. And it was wonderful hearing this eminent psychoanalyst talking about these crass mistakes that he had made. And it really helped me in my life. Also I had my first supervisor, my very first session with him, he actually asked me, what do I call myself? And I said, well, psychotherapist. He said, you can't call yourself a psychotherapist till you've made your first 1,000 mistakes. Mm-hmm. So I mentioned this to Colin, and I think I was the one who actually said, why don't we offer this to the students at Temenos? Do you know this spray foam stuff that you get in builders, that fills cracks and around window frames and things? You press a button and it just keeps on expanding. Well, out of that idea of a seminar to the students, we got into a workshop, second workshop. We thought it would start off with trainees and new counsellors and therapists, but actually we were getting experienced therapists, weren't we, coming to the second one. Then we've been asked to do this lecture. We've got other workshops in the pipeline, and Colin, in his indomitable way, has been doing the research and is now planning articles on the on the subject. So that's how we come to be here. So what I'll do is I'll hand across to you, Colin, and I will interject with comments or stories illustrating some of these points that we come across.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, David. I'm going to be reading from text, so I hope it's not too disruptive for those of you watching. And I'm going back to that statement. You are not a therapist until you've made your first 1,000 mistakes. And this was very familiar to both David and I, having trained in the 1870s or something, but a long time ago. It was very familiar. Older therapists often said this. So it was a frequently used phrase within our profession in the 70s and 80s. And we think it reflected a view, current at that time, that mistakes were inevitable, were to be learned from and reflected upon, and proved oftentimes to be productive within therapy. However, we argue and we contend that in this current climate there is a much more rigid, fearful attitude within the profession towards mistakes that we might make as counsellors and psychotherapists. We may be more anxious now about telling our supervisors about them or fear official complaints being made against us by our clients. Causes of mistakes can, of course, include a wide range of factors. Absent-mindedness, risk-taking, wanting to be liked by clients, inaccurate empathic statements, premature interpretations, premature endings, our inability to contain anxiety, our inability to tolerate aggression, both fielding and having strong reactions to clients and all their stories, and many more. But what is a mistake? Who says it's a mistake? Why do we think our behaviour was a mistake? What mistakes have we learnt from? And can you remember making mistakes and then proving productive? Of course, when we've made a mistake, however we conceptualise it, there can feel so few things that are so awful, professionally speaking, as to be conscious of having made it. The terrible, self-conscious, guilt-rocking, shaming replaying of the incident in your own head. And then the subsequent challenge of, dare you mention it to anyone? Dare you take it to your supervisor? I mean, incidentally, there is recent research indicating that trainees average 2.8 non-disclosures every supervision session. Dare you raise your mistake with the client again and reflect on it together? Whilst this anguish might be going on, you might be fantasizing or indeed fearing that you have caused permanent damage to the client or to the relationship, while simultaneously fearing the implicit or explicit negative judgment of your supervisor, your real one, as the supervisor in your own head is already blaming you. And inevitably within your own worryings, you tell yourself that your supervisor, by contrast, who is someone who is very wise, experienced, skilled, knowledgeable, and of course has never made a single mistake in their whole professional lives. The internal awfulizing and catastrophizing just builds inside our heads. It's even interesting to note that whilst we were planning to run this workshop, that we even cocked up on the date that we were supposed to meet. So David turned up at my house expecting to have a light tea and a planning meeting, and I'd gone dancing, having the date in my own diary for a week later. Fortunately, we are in good company here. The famous writer and therapist Irving Yalom has said,